Hi, I'm Chip, and today we're going to show you how to install the Harbor Smart Battery from Pika Energy. Right here we have our shipment of the Pika Harbor Smart Battery enclosure and 6 of the Panasonic Lithium-ion DCB 105 battery modules that go inside the enclosure. This is a Harbor Plus smart battery that has 16 kilowatt hours of stored energy. So we're going to take this inside, get it unboxed, and get it set up. So we brought our battery inside. It's nice and close to where we're going to be installing it. Let me take you through and show you exactly where we're going to be doing that. So in here we have, this is our X7600 series Pika islanding inverter. There's about 5 kilowatts of solar hooked up to this inverter at this homeowner's house. On this side of the inverter we have our main grid connection coming in, and the protected load panel is connected on this side and is connected over on this wall here. This conduit coming into the left side of the inverter is from the solar PV that's hooked up. And the nice thing about the Harbor Smart Battery is it's going to connect on the same DC breaker assembly in the inverter that the PV comes into, so it's very convenient. That battery is also very space conservative, so what you'll see is we're going to put it in this space right next to the inverter. It's only going to be about this wide and about this tall, so we've got nice amount of room even in a tight little scene like this in this basement. So we're going to unbox our battery enclosure here. The nice thing about the Harbor Smart Battery is that with the enclosure and the battery modules shipping separately, it makes every piece a lot easier to install because you're not just pulling in one huge, really heavy unit as a team lift. So what we're going to do right now is Ben here is going to help me get this unboxed. And one of the first things you're going to find inside the box is your assembly kit. And this includes your hanging bracket and your hardware and your manual. So that's a very important piece that we're going to work with first here on this installation. All right, and this is the enclosure for both the Harbor Smart Battery for the Plus and for the Flex. So both batteries will use this same exact enclosure, and with the Flex you'll have 4 of those Panasonic batteries inside. With the Plus model you'll have 6. So the first thing we're going to do is just take off this cover piece of the battery and set it aside because we're not going to need that until later on. So we've taken our cover off the battery and we've set it aside. We're now going to open this assembly kit, show you what's in there, because this is going to be the first step of getting the battery set up on the wall next to the inverter. You got your manual, your hardware kit, and then this is your mounting bracket for the wall. So the Harbor Smart Battery, unlike some other batteries, it doesn't hang off of the wall studs. It's actually a floor standing enclosure, but this bracket holds it against the wall so that it's nice and safe. So the battery ships with 2 manuals. You're going to have your operations manual, and that's something that the customer will hang on to. This is the installation manual here that Ben's got, and this is going to be your resource guide for walking you through the whole installation. Pretty simple, pretty intuitive. Phone number on the back. If you get tripped up with anything, give us a call. So we're going to put our mounting bracket on the wall here. Ben has already done the measurements and gotten this all set up. He's going to be at 29 5/8 to the bottom of the bracket. You can see this horizontal, or this rather vertical line here where he's brought down the stud so that he has a reference point. There's a lot of different holes in the top and bottom of the bracket here. You want to make sure that you use those to hit a stud with at least 2 screws on each end. So we're going to get started on mounting this bracket here. Ben's going to just put the screws right in, and pretty soon it'll be ready for the battery to go on. Ben's got this all screwed on now, so you've got the 2 on top and 2 on bottom, both hitting this stud that's right in the center here, and then out on the 4 ends here, just to keep it nice and flush against the wall. And as you can see, it's like it grew there. Next step is we're going to bring in the enclosure and get it placed right on top of this bracket, and then we'll be ready to put the batteries in. So the full enclosure is right here. This is all your power electronics and your fan, and then your batteries are going to go right on these shelves here. We're going to give this a spin and show you the back here. So what we're trying to do is this piece right here is going to connect with the top of this bracket on the wall here. So we're going to put it back in place, give it a little bit of a lift to get it onto that bracket. Beautiful. So before you go any further, you want to make sure that you can see the back of the bracket through the enclosure. There's a couple of windows here on the back of the enclosure. You want to make sure that you're on that bracket and that you can see where the screws are going to go. Make sure you also put a level on the battery and use the adjustable feet down in the bottom to ensure that you have both a level battery and you're also able to see those parts of the bracket that you need to get at. We'll go into a little detail on the hardware kit right now. We're going to use 4 screws to attach the back of the enclosure to the bracket. But first, let me just show you that those screws are going to come out of this fastener bag right here. This includes all the fasteners for the clips that hold the batteries in place as well. Those clips look like this. So once we actually put our Panasonic batteries into the enclosure, these clips are going to hold them in place and ground them. And then also included in the hardware kit, these are some data cables that connect the batteries to each other. So we're just going to get these screws put in place right now, but not actually tightened, because we're going to adjust the feet before we go all the way to getting those fully tightened. So now that we've leveled the unit and we've got the feet touching the floor, we need to tighten the jam nut and make sure that that's not going to back out at all. So we left these screws loose so that we could level and place the unit exactly where it needed to be. Now that we've done that, we're going to tighten them up, make everything nice and snug. So our next step is to wire up the battery so that it's actually connected to the inverter here. In this case, the customer's inverter was already in place, so we're just going to remove this wiring compartment cover here, and that gives us access to the DC side of the inverter, which is on the left. So you've got your 30 amp DC disconnects here, you have 4 of them. This site has 3 of them using PV, and we're going to use one of those 30 amp disconnects for the Harbor Smart battery. So right now what Ben's going to do is take off this wiring cover, and you'll see the wiring we're going to be working with, and we'll make a conduit connection between the battery and the inverter. Safety first. So now we've got our conduit in place, and what we're going to do is we're going to wire from this terminal block here down the side of the battery enclosure, through this conduit, and then into the terminals here using number 10 standard wire. So the Harbor Smart battery enclosure ships with the same assembly for both the Flex and the Plus model. And what you have in the enclosure is this power cable that's going to connect to each of the battery modules, and then these data cables that also connect. Note that if you're doing a Flex installation, you'll have this extra cabling down on the bottom, which you won't use because the 2 batteries that you would have down here for a Plus will not be used in the case of a Flex. You'll just have 2 batteries on this shelf, 2 batteries on this shelf, and so you can leave those additional cables unconnected when you install a Harbor Flex. Our battery enclosure is secured to the wall and it's wired up to our inverter, so the next step is to put the Panasonic lithium batteries into the enclosure. Since we're done with all the wiring, the cover can go back on to the inverter. One of the great things about the Pika Islanding inverter is that once this cover is secured in place, there's no exposed wiring, which makes it perfectly touch safe even when the lid is open. So just before we put the lithium batteries in, I want to draw your attention to a different battery in this enclosure here. This is a little Blackstart battery that's included in every Harbor Smart battery, and this allows you to start the Harbor Smart battery back up if there's an outage and the bus goes down. This is supposed to ship unconnected the way it is right now, but at the end of the installation you'll see that we're going to connect this to the positive terminal to energize this battery. So customers are excited about the Harbor Smart battery because it uses these Panasonic DCB 105 lithium-ion battery packs, which are top-of-the-line, world-class from the world's largest supplier of lithium-ion. These are safe NMC-based batteries. The nice thing for installers, though, is that these are also very lightweight. So each of these is only about 60 pounds, makes it very easy to rack them into the enclosure, which we're going to do right now. So you want to go top in first as you rack these. You're going to be putting the batteries in the bottom, working your way up, but the top of the battery, if you tilt it in as you put it in, you'll have an easier time getting it set in place. So as long as you've got your power cable on the bottom and your data connections here, this is top, this is bottom of the battery. And so as you saw, Ben just kind of tilted it in as it came into the rack and just slides right back in place. So we have the first 3 batteries in place. Before we install any other batteries, it's important to put in the spacers. These are the grounding clips that you find in your hardware kit. So there's different shapes of these clips, and you want to make sure you're using the ones that are designed for the inside of the enclosure at this phase, and then after we put in the next 3 batteries, we'll use slightly different clips for that. So right now Ben is going to put in this one right here that spaces out and grounds these batteries as you put them in. And there's going to be a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those, and then 6 more on the upper parts. And you'll find you'll have an easier time with this step if you have a long-handled screwdriver available. So we have the 6 top and the 6 bottom brackets installed. These are providing not just grounding for these battery modules, but also important spacing, so the air will flow in between the batteries as they're sitting in the rack. So it's very important that you use all 4 for each of the batteries that you have on the back level here. All right, so we're going to get the next 3 batteries put in, get all of these connections made, and then we'll get the lid on. So we're going to put in the brackets that go on the outside of these batteries now, and just note that you have different kinds of brackets here. So for these outside brackets, you've got 2 different parts that you're working with. You've got this larger part, and then this one that looks like about half of that part. So these ones are going to be used on the top corner of each of the units. So you want to have the teeth facing in against the battery when you put it on there, and that'll screw on just like that, and it's marked top left. This is also the same one that you'll use down here at the bottom. So you'll have 2 that say top left, and one of them will just go down here. Again, teeth in against the battery. And then for these other units right here, these can go, as long as you got them in the right spot, they're going to go right there, teeth in again against both of the batteries. So our batteries are in place and we have all the brackets installed. So now we need to get everything wired up. These batteries connect in series, so you're going to make sure that you have all of that wiring flowing in the correct sequence. If you open up your installation manual, there's a diagram toward the back that shows you exactly what the wiring sequence should be. So what you're working with is this black power cable, which connects very simply to just these ports on each of the batteries, and they're angled at exactly where you want them to be. But the Cat5 cables can get a little confusing if you haven't done it before, so here's what you want to do. This gray cable is connected to your B-Link, the power electronics device in the top of the enclosure, and the first connection you're going to make is to take the B-Link and connect it to the in COM port on the back battery module here. So once that's connected, your next cable is the blue one going to the out of the outer unit. The way that you're going to connect these two batteries to each other is that you've got those black jumper cables included in your installation kit bag. So we'll do those short jumper cables at the end, but just to make sure you get the sequence right, you want the gray one to go in the back top one for the in port, and then the blue one for the front battery is going to be out. And then work your way down. So the next one, blue, is going to go in on the back unit, and then the orange will be out on the front unit. And finally, this orange will be the in for the back unit, and you'll have a final jumper from this battery to this battery here. So now that you've got those ones installed, you can put in those jumper cables, which we'll do next. So all that's left in our hardware kit now are those jumper cables. So these will help complete the series connections of each of these battery modules. So again, it's important that you have these wires connected correctly for the Ethernet. So you want to have each of these is going to be going to the correct in and out. So when you have your battery coming in on the back battery, then you're going to have your next one going out. So your jumper is really the thing that's connecting the out port of this battery to the in port of this battery. And then everything is flowing seamlessly from this battery going down to your blue, coming into the back of this battery. This next jumper is going to the in on this battery. Finally, your orange cable is going to come down here to the in on this. And so your last connection will be to go out from this back battery to the in port on this front battery. And now all of your data connections are made and you can connect your power. So these black cables are your power, and each of the batteries has these terminals for these connections to be made. So now that all of our connections are made for both the data and the power for the batteries, the last cable to connect is this small one up here on the Blackstart battery. You want to ensure that when you put the cover on, there are no wires crowding out the side of the enclosure. So what Ben is doing here is just giving that a twist, which will keep it nice and tucked out of the way. So just a reminder that if you're doing a Harbor Flex installation, you wouldn't have those two bottom Panasonic battery units there, and so you wouldn't have had any wiring past this shelf here. But since this is a Harbor Plus, we have all 6 of those units installed with all of those data connections running right down to the bottom of the enclosure. So with everything fully installed, we're ready to put the cover on and then get this battery commissioned. We recommend you take the plastic off before you start to try to put it on the enclosure. So we've taken the plastic off of this unit, but yours will have plastic wrapping on it that actually can be taken off after you install the lid. And we recommend that in the field, in order to keep the unit from taking any wear and tear while you're installing it, just leave that plastic on. It's cut perfectly so that you can just peel it right off at the end of the installation. So before you put your cover on, just take note that there's a catch down in the bottom of the enclosure right here, and that's on the inside of the bottom of the lid. And what's going to happen is when you put the cover in place, that's going to catch down here. So as you bring it in, you're going to go kind of up into the enclosure and then give it a nudge in order to get that piece to click into place. Once that's in place, those PEMs down at the bottom will be lined up perfectly for you to put in the 2 faceplate screws. So for this installation, we put our battery on the left side of the Pika islanding inverter, which is pretty convenient because the DC side of the inverter is the left side. So we have a very short conduit run. But if you are doing an installation where the battery needs to be on the right side of the inverter, you can do that. It's fine. You just make a longer conduit run. And there is a knockout on the left side of the battery to accommodate that. So our battery is in place, the lid is on, the installation is complete. Now it's time for the commissioning. The first step to commissioning the system is to turn on the breaker for the battery that's located inside the Pika islanding inverter. With that breaker in the on position, we can now turn back on the breaker for the inverter located at the main service panel. And now with our inverter coming back online, the only steps remaining are to enable the inverter and then turn on the Harbor Smart battery. From the home screen on the inverter, press the center button to bring up a list of available operational modes. We're going to choose self-supply mode for this installation. Use the keypad to select and confirm the desired mode. And now we need to enable the inverter. Press the right arrow key to select the device page of the inverter. Press the center button and choose Enable. With the inverter now enabled and the correct operational mode, it's time to power on and configure the Harbor Smart battery. To power on and configure Harbor, begin by pressing the right arrow key on the inverter keypad until you see the Harbor device page. Press the center button to bring up the menu and select Mod Settings. Here you'll want to set the correct number of battery modules, and you'll use 4 for the Harbor Flex or 6 for the Harbor Plus. Since this is a Harbor Plus installation, we're choosing 6. Adjust any other set points as desired and refer to the Harbor operational manual for descriptions on user configurable set points. Before enabling the battery from the inverter, make sure you turn on the battery disconnect. From the Harbor device page, press the center button to bring up the menu, select Enable and Confirm. So from the Harbor device page, you can see that your power right now we have a negative power because the battery is actually taking its charge from the solar array. Our battery voltage is currently around 280 volts, and the state of charge that these batteries shipped with was around 40%. However, if we turn on some load, since we're in self-supply mode, you'll see that this power will change. So now the battery is discharging and making about 1200 watts to meet the loads that we just turned on. And if you go back to the home screen, you'll see the flow of energy coming from, you've got your power coming from the solar panels down here. The battery is putting in right now about 1.2 kilowatts, and the home is consuming that sum. And we're not using any grid power since we're in the self-supply mode. So now we're done with our smart battery installation. We have a Harbor Plus with up to 15.9 kilowatt hours of usable energy, and we've got our islanding inverter here. 2 devices. This home is ready to use self-supply, it's ready to use backup power, and it'll have up to 10 kilowatts of surge power even without a grid connection. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any other questions, be sure to give us a call. Visit us at pika-energy.com.